Ladies and gentlemen, if you think you're not being watched, think again. What you're about to see is going to be mind-blowing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. This one is another crazy video with Yuval Harari, and this video is 3 years old. Now, before we get into this, there's a few things that I need to do scripturally with you to get you to understand and make sense of what you're about to see, because all of these things are very spiritual, right? This is all major stuff. It's all very spiritual stuff. And there's so much that drives what we're looking at right now. Now, one thing I want to point out is that this video is from 3.5 years ago. So this is going to probably blow your mind, because this is not a video that's well known. It has not been seen by a lot of people. As a matter of fact, where the original video comes from, there may be 130,000 eyes that have actually seen what Yuval Harari says here. But I can tell you this right now, what you're going to see is remarkable in that it gives you a glimpse of how they were looking at things 3 years ago and how true all of these things are manifesting right now. And there's spiritual reasons for this. Now, it starts off with the spirit of Antichrist, okay? The Bible tells us that somebody is going to come. Revelation tells us this, Revelation chapter 6, Revelation chapter 13, all over the book of Revelation, actually, that there is going to be somebody that is going to come who is going to, in essence, bring a promise of peace. He is going to rule the world in a way that people are very excited about his rule. And as a matter of fact, even when he goes crazy and he sets himself up in the temple and demands to be worshiped in Revelation 13, which, praise God, we won't be here when that happens, he is actually going to demand that people show their allegiance in their worship towards him by bowing down to the image of a beast that is the image of this beast, right? And he's also going to require that people have the mark of the beast on their forehead or on their right hand. And we know this is a physical mark, and that mark is 666. Now, what's interesting about this fact is that people are going to line up to want to do this. And we know this because in Revelation chapter 14, it tells us about the third angel in that chapter actually warning people, don't take the mark. If you do, you're going to die. And yet what happens? People choose not to listen. So what we see here is powerful. We see that this will be a man who will, in essence, replace the Messiah. That's what Antichrist means. Anti means instead of. Christo or Christ means Messiah. So this is instead of the Messiah or in replacement of the Messiah. So that's what the Antichrist is. And the spirit of Antichrist, by the way, according to 1 John, is alive and well in this world today. And the spirit of Antichrist is, in essence, anything that chooses to remove the collective or individual consciousness of God by replacing him, right? And the way that he's being replaced right now is, in essence, very, very significant and very, very powerful. The spirit of Antichrist is ushering in the Antichrist who will come, the final Antichrist, and this is going to be something that we know is happening and is literally around the corner. Now, this is happening in all kinds of ways. What you need to understand is the way the Antichrist works and the spirit of Antichrist works is you have to identify characteristics that are unique to God, okay? Things that only God can do, and then you have to seek to create things that imitate or emulate what God does, but not at the level that he does it, right? That's how you deceive people into thinking that something that is not God actually is God. And that's how you get people to replace God through the spirit of Antichrist. This is exactly how it works. I'm going to give you an example of this because this goes back to the subject of this video. And this video is going to be very telling. This is Yuval Harari that's talking at the Athens Democracy Forum that was done with the New York Times. By the way, this was in 2020. This was in October of 2020, just before the elections. And they were discussing the implications of democracy and elections and so on and so forth, which there's a lot of discussion about that kind of stuff. But there's a bigger issue here, and it's one that's more significant. And this one speaks about surveillance and seeing all and knowing all and understanding all. Now, before we go into this video, because this video is going to demonstrate the spirit of Antichrist to you, let me read some passages to you that I think are really important, okay? Because the Bible tells us all over the place that God sees everything. He knows everything. Look, Proverbs chapter 15, verse 3, it says, the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. 2 Chronicles 16:9, this is one that's very familiar to a lot of people. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect towards him. Herein hast done foolishly, therefore from henceforth thou shalt have wars. So in other words, God's looking. He's seeing. And when he identifies foolishness, he curses it. When he identifies godliness, he rewards it. In other words, he can see everything. Look at this. Look at what it says in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7. It says, but the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance or the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on outward appearance, but what? The Lord looketh on the heart. So God sees what's in the inside, what's seemingly unknowable. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 12 through 13. For the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even into the dividing asunder of soul and spirit and of the joints and marrow, and is the discerner of thoughts and intents of the heart. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 12, for the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers, but the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. This one's a big one. Job 34:21, for his eyes are upon the ways of man, and what? He seeth all his goings. Look at Zechariah 4:10, for who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice and see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. They are the eyes of the Lord. Notice this, which run to and fro through the whole earth. Proverbs chapter 5, verse 21, for the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and pondereth all his goings. Psalm 139, it's very obvious all throughout the Psalms. You can go all through Psalm 139. You can go through, there's lots of passages in the Psalms that talk about the eyes of the Lord, right? How about this? The very beginning of Psalm 139, verse 1, it says, O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me, right? There's lots of these passages, right? Psalms 33:18, behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope in his mercy. Again, God's eyes are there. He's watching. Proverbs 22:12, the eyes of the Lord preserveth knowledge, and he overthroweth the words of the transgressor. Psalms 34:15, the eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears are open unto their cry. It is all over the Bible. God sees everything. So think about this. If you want to yield to the spirit of Antichrist, then you want to create a counterfeit. And in that counterfeit, what do you want to do? If you want to replace the consciousness of God with a new God, you want to create a God that can see all things and know all things. And that is the God of AI. That's what Yuval Harari is doing. He is utilizing the spirit of Antichrist, in essence, to replace the very thing that only God is capable of. AI can't see like God can see. But look at what they're doing, folks. This is what's staggering. Look at the lengths that they are going to be able to replace God by seeing and understanding things. Watch what he says. This is crazy. Listen.
The COVID crisis as a watershed moment in terms of surveillance, data surveillance, and so on. Explain to us your fears, your concerns about this, and how we can deal with it.
Okay, listen carefully to how Yuval answers this question. What he says is very telling. And folks, let me remind you of something. This was literally, I'm not joking, like this is no joke. This was almost 4 years ago. Almost 4 years ago. Listen to this. This is heavy. Listen.
No, I think maybe in a couple of decades when people look back, the thing they will remember from the COVID crisis is this is the moment when everything went digital. And if this was the moment when everything became monitored. That we agreed.
By the way, in case you didn't understand his accent, he said this is the moment when everything became monitored. This is the moment where everything became digital and everything became monitored. And by the way, I just want to make a little side note here. I am going to interrupt what he says every now and again to provide commentary. This is a fair use thing. It's one of the things that I'm required to do when I make these videos. The other thing is, if you want to watch the whole video, you can go and search out the video and you can watch it in its entirety. I know that there's been some people that have been very bothered by some of my commentary on this. That's okay. I don't want to bother people, but I want to do what I feel led by the Lord to do. So take a very close listen to what he has to say here, because his answer is very telling.
To be surveyed all the time, not just in authoritarian regimes, but even in democracies. And maybe most importantly at all, this was the moment when surveillance started going under the skin. Because really we haven't seen anything yet. I think that the big process that's happening right now in the world is hacking human beings, the ability to hack humans, to understand deeply what's happening within you.
Okay, so when he talks about hacking human beings, I want to remind you of something, right? We talked about surveillance. What he's saying about surveillance, this is in essence another characteristic of the spirit of Antichrist. God sees all things, knows all things, so I'm going to create a tool within AI and so on and so forth where I can watch you all the time because I'm the new God, right? That's what's happening here. And then now he's talking about hacking human beings. He's speaking about replacing God, the one who created all of mankind. He's now talking about replacing God because he's talking about transhumanism. This is the new Tower of Babel. This is the spirit of Antichrist. This is replacing God's function, replacing God's role, replacing God's identity, and seeking to deceive people into thinking that God is actually better. So look what he says, because he's about to bring in an illustration of him being homosexual and how he didn't realize he was homosexual until he was in his 20s. Yet with this tool, the government will be able to know he's a homosexual far before that time. And if that doesn't alarm you, wait until you hear what he says next.
What makes you go? And for that, the most important data is not what you read and who you meet and what you buy. It's what's happening inside your body. So we had these two big revolutions, the computer science revolution or the infotech revolution and the revolution in the biological sciences.
Okay, so computer revolution, biological science revolution, and the one thing that you have to remember, right, is he's talking about, the way it used to be, they look at what you read, what you eat, what you talk about, the friends that you make associations with. This is all external stuff that mankind was designed by God to analyze and interact with, and we're even given instruction in the Bible by God on how to interact with people around us, how we interact with mankind, what we do with our eating, what we do with our speaking, what we do with our breathing, how we talk to people, how we interact with people. But now he's saying, I want to take it deeper. He's basically seeking to separate any association with anything that's spiritual. He wants to make it purely biological, and then he wants to replace the God that the spirit within us pursues by going to something that is very, very different, right? This is satanic, and he sounds very convincing, but what he's doing here is literally satanic. Listen to this.
And they are still separate, but they are about to merge. They are merging around, I would say, the biometric sensor. It's the thing, it's the gadget, it's the technology that converts biological data into digital data that can be analyzed by computers. And having the ability to really monitor people under the skin, this is the biggest game changer of all.
When he talks about biological data being converted into digital data so that it can be analyzed by computers, what he doesn't realize is he's taking what I would call vital signs, okay? Not biological data. He's talking about vital signs. He's talking about heartbeats. He's talking about the elevation of blood pressure. He's talking about temperature. He's talking about breathing levels. He's talking about the way eyes move. He's saying we should take that information, bring it through our sensors, digital biometric sensors, bring it into a computer so a computer analyzes it. But I want to make myself very, very clear. There is no supercomputer on the face of the earth that is more complex than the human brain, number one. So you can say we're bringing all these complexities in, we're making these microchips or whatever, but that's just simply mankind pretending to be God when what God already created is far more complex. How do we know that the human brain is far more complex than any supercomputer? Because mankind created those supercomputers, okay? Think about that for a second. If you don't believe me, just study proteins in your body. Study DNA. Take a moment to study DNA. Yuval is not talking about the complexities of those mechanisms because they're far more complicated with respect to its digital prowess than anything that's out there, okay? He's simply referring to biometric data that determines what your temperature is, how your heart is beating. Those are the things that he's talking about. And actually, you can see it. He's very subtle about how he communicates that. He wants it to sound superior to you guys, but he's deceiving you into believing or taking into or embracing the spirit of Antichrist. Look what he says.
Because this is the key for getting to know people better than they know themselves. I often give the example from my own personal life that I realized I was gay only when I was 21. And I keep thinking about the time when I was 15, 16, how could I have missed it? You know, something so important about myself should have been obvious, but I didn't know. Now, today, or in 5 or 10 years, any algorithm of Microsoft or Amazon or the government would be able to know such a thing when I'm 12 or 13, just by monitoring what's happening in my body, what's happening to my eyes when let's say I see a boy and a girl walking on the beach. Where do my eyes focus? So this is the crucial revolution.
So let me tell you why that's a serious problem, right? Because I can take that digital biometric data, right? In other words, I can take that biometric data, which is telling me what my biology is doing. I can record it into something digital, and then I can create an algorithm. He said it, like the government. He said it. The government, Microsoft, Google, right? Whatever, Amazon. I can take that data and I can create an algorithm that is based on the dark, demonic, and very deprived soul of man that is functioning through its dead and sinful nature to interpret that data in a way that will influence me or deceive me into coming to a conclusion. So think about it like this. If I'm a 12-year-old boy, or let's say I'm an 8-year-old boy, and I see a woman and a man on the beach, and I'm in the stage of my life where I spend more time staring at the man and at the woman, they would take that biological data, as they would call it, that biometric data, and they would immediately seek to program me into thinking that I'm gay because I spent all that time looking at that man, when in reality what was probably going on was I was developing some type of curiosity based on something else that I was seeing, and it had nothing to do with me being gay. But if I can replace the position of God by seeking to act like some spirit that tells somebody something based on their biometric data, I can control them. I can move them. I can manipulate them. By the way, I just want you to know this. This is exactly what the serpent does. This is exactly what the devil does. The devil is good at observing us. He's good at watching us. He's good at seeing us, and he uses those things to manipulate us, but he's not God. He pretends to be God. He wants us to think that he is God, but he's not. Look at what he goes on to say.
And COVID is critical because this is what convinces people to accept, to legitimize total biometric surveillance. If we want to stop this epidemic, we need not just to monitor people, we need to monitor what's happening under their skin, their body temperature. Like we walked in here, we had to go through a body temperature test.
Even in Israel, it has become a national security issue, right?
So again, I'm not against surveillance. It's an important tool, especially to fight epidemics. The question is, again, who is doing it and how?
Okay, so we'll stop it here. We don't need to take it any further because he's giving us insight into the devil's tactics. And what he's in essence explaining to us is these people will use the fear of death to cause us to capitulate to the infrastructure that they want to utilize in order to surveil us. And by the way, he said this 3 years ago, and we're seeing it happening right now. It's manifesting in front of our faces. We are watching it. Folks, this is the reality of how the devil does what he does. I want you to see this. As sophisticated as this may seem, as complicated as this may seem, as busy as this may seem, as aggressive as this may seem, it is what it is. And what it is a fake. What it is a fake. Listen to the last part of what he says, okay? Because again, this continues to show how good the devil is at what he does. Listen to the last part of this.
If you give it to the security service to do it, that's extremely dangerous. Yes, now they're using it to see whether you have the coronavirus. But exactly the same technology can determine what you think about the government. You know, anger is a biological phenomena just like disease. It's not some spiritual thing out there. It's a biological pattern in your body.
Okay, notice what he just does. And he's going to go on with this. He says that anger is a biological pattern and it is not some type of spiritual phenomenon. Again, this is part of the devil's tactic to get you to separate the responsibility that you have in that you are created in the likeness and image of God, which means you're a living soul. You have an obligation. And the idea that Romans teaches us is that we were dead, right? And because of the quickening of the Lord, the same spirit that rose Christ from the dead is the same spirit that quickened our mortal bodies that we might have victory over sin. So what the lesson here is, the teaching that the Bible gives us is that we are a living soul. We're just not a bunch of biological material. He believes we are. His idea is that we're just a bunch of biological material. He has to teach you that, and he has to deceive you with that if he's going to get you to believe in the lie that there is something that is inferior that's actually a God to the superior God, right? He doesn't want us to worship the superior God. He wants us to worship what we deem as God that's actually inferior. Listen to the rest of what he says, and we'll close it off.
With this kind of surveillance, I mean, you watch the big president, the big leader, gives a speech on television. The television could be monitoring you and knowing whether you're angry or not, just by analyzing the cues, the biological cues coming from your body. So people are now watching us online, all over the world, this conversation. Now, maybe even right now, the people who are watching us are being watched and analyzed. And the thing is, it's not just you're now watching this. The thing is, we know that you're watching this, and we also know how you feel. Are you angry about what you hear? Are you frightened? Are you bored? This is the kind of power that Stalin didn't have. When Stalin gave a speech, everybody, of course, clapped their hand and smiled. Now, how do you know what they really think about Stalin? It's very difficult.
See, the problem is that Stalin did have this power. Hitler had this power, and anybody who lived in those days had this power because they were all satanically inspired. So they knew who to target. They knew who to go for. Listen, when Hitler attacked the Jews and he murdered the Jews, he did that because he knew that attacking the righteous would be the thing that would be necessary in order to accomplish what he called the Third Reich. Look, these things were inspired by the devil. The devil has this powerful observation capacity. He is more powerful than any supercomputer. He's more powerful than any digital biometric sensor. He sees all this stuff and he inspires these leaders to do these evil things. But what Yuval is convincing you of, or trying to convince you of, is that what you have available to you is greater than any biological material that was ever made. You become the new God. You're a hacked human. You're better than God. Folks, this is the spirit of Antichrist. Here's what we need to do. It's really, really simple. We need to go before the Lord our God. The Bible says we need to seek him. We need to put him first in everything that we do, and we need to worship him with our whole hearts and our whole minds. Let me read one last passage to you. I think this is very important and, of course, extremely, extremely appropriate for what we're reading here. So the passage is 1 John chapter 2. It's verse 15. And by the way, these verses that I'm going to read are the verses right before he talks about the spirit of Antichrist. And this is going to make sense because if we want to know how to defeat this, if we want to know how to the right attitude to have in the midst of this, because it's everywhere, then we have to read what John says. And he says this. He says, love not the world. This is 1 John 2:15. He says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. By the way, this is the world system, right? This is the evil of the world. He says, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of this world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. And he goes on to say this, little children, it is the last time, and you have heard that Antichrist shall come. Even now there are many Antichrists, whereby we know that this is the last time. They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would no doubt have continued with us, but they went out that they might be made manifest that they were not all of us. But you have an unction from the Holy One, and you know all things. In other words, you are not like Yuval says. You are not like that person that's got all that biological material in you, and you're just a bunch of biological reactions. No, you're not. You have an unction within you. You've got the Spirit of God living within you, right? And he says, I have not, verse 21, written unto you because you know not the truth, but because you know it, and that no lie is of the truth. It's heavy. So that's the great ending thought for us. We got to stop and really think about the power of the words that I just read. We are living in an antichrist world, folks. And my hope and my prayer is that we'll open up our eyes to recognize what's really going on. Because I can tell you this right now, this stuff is life-changing. This stuff changes literally everything. When we see it for what it is, it gives us a better understanding of the things going on around us, and it changes literally everything. So keep your eyes on the Lord and understand that God is good and he's faithful all the time. God bless you.